The blood on her apron had long since dried brown when Lucy Bennett realized she had never been kissed, not once in her 22 years, and certainly never under the stars that stretched endlessly over the Utah Territory. She stood at the back door of the boarding house where she worked, staring up at clouds that had obscured the night sky for nearly 3 weeks straight, thick and heavy with the promise of rain that never seemed to come. Salt Lake City in the summer of 1878 was dusty and growing, filled with miners and merchants, families seeking new starts and opportunists seeking quick fortunes. But Lucy had never found herself drawn to any of the men who passed through Mrs. Hartley's establishment. She scrubbed linens, prepared meals, and kept her head down, saving every penny she could manage to squirrel away from her modest wages. The clouds tonight looked particularly dense, swirling gray masses that blotted out even the brightest stars. Lucy sighed and returned inside, where the heat from the kitchen stove made sweat bead along her hairline. Mrs. Hartley had retired for the evening, leaving Lucy to finish the last of the dishes from supper. The boarding house was quiet except for the occasional creak of floorboards overhead as their 7 current guests settled in for the night. She had just set the final clean plate on the drying rack when she heard the knock at the front door. Lucy frowned, wiping her hands on her apron as she made her way through the dining room. It was well past 9 o'clock, late for anyone to be calling, but not unheard of for travelers arriving after a long journey. When she opened the door, she had to tilt her head back to meet the eyes of the man standing on the porch. He was massive, easily 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle, with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the doorframe. His hair hung past his collar, dark brown and slightly wavy, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin clothing that marked him as someone more comfortable in the wilderness than in town, and he carried a heavy pack on his back along with a rifle slung over one shoulder. "Evening, miss," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in Lucy's chest. "I am looking for a room for a few nights. Are you still taking guests?" Lucy found herself momentarily unable to speak, caught off guard by the sheer presence of this man. She had seen mountain men before, trappers and hunters who came down from the high country to trade their furs and stock up on supplies, but none had ever looked quite like this. His eyes were a startling gray-blue, the color of storm clouds, and they regarded her with a patient kindness that seemed at odds with his intimidating size. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, we have rooms available. Please come in." He had to duck his head to enter through the doorway, and Lucy noticed he moved with surprising grace for someone so large. She led him to the front desk, where the ledger sat open. "It is 50 cents a night, including breakfast and supper," Lucy explained, falling back on the familiar routine of checking in guests. "Lunch is available for an additional 15 cents. We ask that guests keep their rooms tidy and respect quiet hours after 10 in the evening." "That sounds fair." The man set his pack down with a heavy thud and reached into a leather pouch at his belt, pulling out several silver coins. "I will take 3 nights to start if that is acceptable. I may need to extend my stay depending on how my business goes." "Of course." Lucy took the coins and noted them in the ledger. "May I have your name, sir?" "Fletcher Daniels." He watched as she carefully wrote his name in her neat script. "And yours, Miss?" "Lucy Bennett. I help Mrs. Hartley run the boarding house." She retrieved a key from the row of hooks on the wall behind the desk. "You will be in room 6, upstairs at the end of the hall. It is one of our larger rooms, which I think you will appreciate given your—" She paused, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "Given your stature." Something that might have been amusement flickered in Fletcher's eyes, but he simply nodded and accepted the key. "Thank you, Miss Bennett. I appreciate your thoughtfulness." Lucy showed him upstairs, acutely aware of how small she felt walking ahead of him. At 5 feet 3 inches, she was accustomed to being shorter than most people, but Fletcher Daniels made her feel positively tiny. She unlocked room 6 and stepped aside to let him enter. "There is fresh water in the pitcher," she said, pointing to the washstand. "If you need anything laundered, you can leave it in the basket by the door and I will collect it in the morning. Breakfast is served at 7, but if you need to eat earlier, I can arrange something. 7 is fine." Fletcher set his pack on the floor and leaned his rifle carefully against the wall. "This is a good room, thank you." Lucy nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Miss Bennett." When she looked back, he was standing by the window, looking out at the overcast sky. "Does it rain often here in the summer?" "Not usually," Lucy admitted. "We have had clouds for weeks now, but no rain. It is strange weather." Fletcher was quiet for a moment, still gazing out at the obscured stars. "I have been waiting for clear skies for some time now. Seems I may have to wait a bit longer." There was something in his tone that made Lucy curious, but she did not feel it was her place to pry. She bid him good night and made her way back downstairs, where she banked the fire in the stove and checked that all the doors were locked. As she climbed the stairs to her own small room on the 3rd floor, she found herself thinking about those storm cloud eyes and wondering what business had brought Fletcher Daniels down from the mountains. The next morning, Lucy woke before dawn as she always did and made her way to the kitchen to begin preparing breakfast. She had biscuits in the oven and was frying bacon when Mrs. Hartley shuffled in, her gray hair still in its nighttime braid. "Morning, Lucy dear," the older woman said, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the pot that was always the first thing Lucy prepared. "I heard we had a late arrival last night." "Yes, a Mr. Fletcher Daniels. He took room 6 for 3 nights." Lucy cracked eggs into the hot skillet, watching them sizzle and pop. "He is a mountain man from the looks of him." Mrs. Hartley raised her eyebrows. "Big fellow." "Very." Lucy felt that strange heat in her cheeks again and busied herself with the eggs to hide it. "Well, as long as he is respectful and pays his board, I do not mind what he does for a living," Mrs. Hartley said practically. "Though you be careful, Lucy. Some of those mountain men have been alone too long and forget their manners around decent women." "Yes, madam." Lucy did not mention that Fletcher had been nothing but polite, even gentle in his manner despite his imposing size. There had been something about the way he looked at her, a careful respect that she had not experienced from many men. The other guests began trickling down for breakfast over the next half hour. There were 2 mining prospectors who had been staying for nearly a month, a traveling salesman passing through on his way to California, a young couple newly arrived from Ohio, and an older gentleman who claimed to be a retired Army officer. They all took their usual seats at the long dining table, and Lucy and Mrs. Hartley served them family style, setting out platters of bacon, eggs, biscuits, and fried potatoes. Fletcher was the last to arrive, and his entrance caused a noticeable pause in the conversation. He had to duck through the doorway again, and Lucy noticed he had cleaned up, his hair damp and pushed back from his face, his beard neatly trimmed. He wore a fresh shirt, still buckskin but clearly his better clothing, and he moved to the only empty chair at the table, which happened to be at the far end near where Lucy was pouring coffee. "Good morning, Mr. Daniels," she said, filling his cup. "I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you." His voice was still that deep rumble, but quieter, as if he was conscious of not overwhelming the space. "This is a peaceful house." Lucy smiled and went to fetch more biscuits from the kitchen. When she returned, the other guests had resumed their conversations, though she noticed several of them casting curious glances at Fletcher. The mountain man ate steadily but not greedily, his manners surprisingly refined. He did not speak unless spoken to, answering the retired officer's questions about the mountain passes with brief but informative responses. After breakfast, Lucy cleared the table while Mrs. Hartley supervised the young couple, who had questions about the best places to look for work in Salt Lake City. Fletcher lingered after the others had dispersed, standing somewhat awkwardly in the dining room as if uncertain whether to speak. "Was everything satisfactory, Mr. Daniels?" Lucy asked, stacking plates. "More than satisfactory. You are an excellent cook, Miss Bennett." He paused, then seemed to make a decision. "I wonder if I might ask you something." Lucy looked up at him, surprised. "Of course." "I need to do some business in town, purchase some supplies and such, but I am not very familiar with Salt Lake City. Would you be able to recommend a good general store, and perhaps a place that might buy furs?" "Certainly. Henderson's General Store on Main Street is the best for supplies. Fair prices and good quality. As for furs, you will want to speak with Mr. Carlson at the trading post near the rail yard. He deals primarily in pelts and will give you an honest price." Fletcher nodded, seeming to commit this information to memory. "I appreciate that. And if I may ask one more thing." He hesitated, and Lucy saw something almost uncertain in his expression, odd for such a physically imposing man. "Is there a good place to buy something nice? A gift, perhaps? What sort of gift?" Lucy asked before she could stop herself, then felt embarrassed at her nosiness. "Forgive me, I did not mean to pry." "No, it is a fair question. I am looking for something for a lady." He must have seen something change in Lucy's expression, because he quickly added, "My sister. She is getting married in the fall, and I promised her I would bring her something special when I next came down from the mountains." Lucy felt a confusing mixture of relief and embarrassment at her own reaction. "Oh, how lovely. There is a shop on 2nd Street, Mrs. Palmer's, that has beautiful fabrics and notions. They also carry some jewelry and fancy items from back east." "That sounds perfect. Thank you again, Miss Bennett. You have been very helpful." Fletcher gave her a small nod that was almost a bow and took his leave, retrieving his hat from the rack by the door before heading out into the morning. Lucy finished clearing the breakfast dishes, trying not to think about why her heart had skipped when Fletcher mentioned needing a gift for a lady, or why she felt so relieved when he clarified it was for his sister. It was foolish. She barely knew the man. He was just a guest passing through, like so many others. But as she washed the dishes, she found herself hoping he would extend his stay beyond the 3 nights he had paid for. The day passed in its usual rhythm of chores. Lucy stripped and changed the linens in the rooms, swept the floors, prepared lunch for those guests who paid for it, and began the preparations for supper. Mrs. Hartley went out for her afternoon social calls, leaving Lucy to manage things on her own, which was a responsibility she had grown comfortable with over the 3 years she had worked at the boarding house. Fletcher returned in the late afternoon, carrying several wrapped packages. He greeted Lucy politely as he passed through the front hall and headed upstairs to his room. She tried not to notice how the house seemed smaller with him in it, how his presence seemed to fill the space in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size, and everything to do with something she could not quite name. That evening at supper, Fletcher was more talkative, perhaps made comfortable by the previous night's rest and successful day in town. He told stories about the mountains, about tracking elk through pine forests and watching eagles soar over valleys so remote that white men had likely never set foot in them. The other guests listened with rapt attention, even the mining prospectors who had their own tales of adventure to tell. Lucy found herself pausing in her serving, caught up in the sound of his voice and the pictures his words painted. He spoke of a world so different from her life in Salt Lake City, a world of freedom and solitude and raw natural beauty. She wondered what it would be like to see such places, to stand on a mountain peak and look out over untouched wilderness. After supper, Lucy went outside to hang some dish towels to dry in the evening air. The clouds were still heavy overhead, obscuring the stars she so rarely got to see anymore. She heard the back door open and turned to find Fletcher standing there, his large frame silhouetted against the light from inside. "Forgive me for disturbing you, Miss Bennett," he said. "I was hoping for some fresh air." "You are not disturbing me," Lucy assured him. "Please, there is plenty of air to share." He stepped out onto the small back porch, and Lucy was again struck by how large he was. His muscles were clearly visible even beneath his shirt, the result of a life spent surviving in harsh conditions through physical strength and skill. She felt a flutter in her stomach that she did not entirely understand. "You are looking at the sky again," Fletcher observed, following her gaze upward. "Do you enjoy stargazing?" "I used to," Lucy admitted. "When I was younger, before I came to work here, I lived on a small farm outside of town. The stars were so bright there, away from the city lights. I would lie in the grass and look up at them for hours, making up stories about what might be beyond them. That sounds peaceful." There was a wistful note in Fletcher's voice. "I spend many nights under the stars in the mountains. Sometimes it is the only entertainment to be had, watching the sky and listening to the night sounds. It must be beautiful." "It is." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I have been waiting for clear skies for a specific reason, actually. Back home, there is a tradition. My father taught me that before you ask a woman an important question, you should wait for the stars to be visible. He believed that the stars were witnesses to the truth in a man's heart, and that any promise made under their light was binding." Lucy felt her breath catch. "That is a beautiful tradition. My father was a good man. He passed 5 years ago, but I still try to honor his teachings." Fletcher looked down at her, his expression thoughtful. "Do you think that is foolish, following old traditions?" "Not at all," Lucy said firmly. "I think traditions connect us to the people we have loved and lost. They keep their memory alive." Fletcher's smile was soft, transforming his rugged features. "That is a kind way to look at it. Thank you, Miss Bennett." They stood in companionable silence for a few minutes, both looking up at the cloud-covered sky. Lucy felt strangely comfortable in his presence, despite how recently they had met. There was something steady about Fletcher, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in a long time. "I should let you get back to your work," Fletcher finally said. "And I have some letters to write before bed, but I wanted to say I appreciate your kindness. You have made my stay here very pleasant." "You are welcome, Mr. Daniels. I am glad you chose to stay with us." He gave her that small bow again and went back inside, leaving Lucy alone with her thoughts and the obscured stars. Over the next 2 days, a pattern developed. Fletcher would go out each morning to conduct his business in town, return for lunch or in the early afternoon, and then spend the evenings at the boarding house. He always sought out Lucy's company when he could, engaging her in conversation while she worked or sitting on the back porch with her in the evenings, both of them watching the stubbornly cloudy skies. Lucy learned that Fletcher lived in a cabin he had built himself in the Wasatch Mountains, about 2 days' ride from Salt Lake City. He trapped in the winter and spent his summers hunting and fishing, living off the land and only coming to town a few times a year to trade and resupply. He had a younger sister named Sarah who lived in a small settlement to the north, and it was her upcoming wedding that had prompted his current visit to civilization. In turn, Fletcher learned about Lucy's life. She told him how she had come to Salt Lake City 3 years ago after her parents died of fever, leaving her alone at 19 with no other family. Mrs. Hartley had taken her in and given her work, and Lucy had been grateful for the stability and security, even if the work was hard and the pay modest. "You think you will stay here?" Fletcher asked on his third evening as they sat on the back porch steps. "Working at the boarding house?" Lucy considered the question. "I do not know. Sometimes I think about saving enough money to buy a small piece of land, maybe start a little farm like my parents had. But that is just a dream. It would take years to save that much." "It is a good dream," Fletcher said. "A person should have land of their own, a place that belongs to them." "Is that why you built your cabin? To have something that was yours?" "Partly, but also because I could not bear to live in towns anymore." He gestured vaguely at the buildings around them. "Too many people, too much noise. In the mountains, everything is simple. You know what you need to do to survive, and you do it. There is no pretense, no complication." "It sounds lonely," Lucy ventured. "Sometimes it is," Fletcher admitted, "but loneliness is different from being alone." "I am alone in the mountains, yes, but I am rarely lonely. I have the trees and the animals, the rivers and the sky. They are company enough most of the time." "Most of the time." He looked at her with those storm cloud eyes, and Lucy felt her heart skip. "Most of the time," he repeated softly. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Lucy could not quite name. She wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to understand the look in his eyes, but before she could find the words, Mrs. Hartley called from inside that there was a problem with one of the guest rooms that needed Lucy's attention. When Lucy returned to the porch 20 minutes later, Fletcher had gone upstairs. She felt an odd sense of loss, as if she had missed something important. The next morning, Fletcher paid for 3 more nights at the boarding house. Lucy tried not to feel as pleased about this as she did, reminding herself that he was just a guest, that he had his own life in the mountains to return to. But her heart did not seem to listen to her head's reasonable arguments. That afternoon, Fletcher surprised her by asking if she would be willing to walk with him to Mrs. Palmer's shop. "I bought fabric for my sister yesterday, but I am not certain I chose well," he explained. "I was hoping you might give me your opinion, and if it is not suitable, help me select something better." Lucy agreed, telling Mrs. Hartley she would be gone for an hour. She removed her apron and put on her bonnet, and then she and Fletcher set out into the dusty streets of Salt Lake City. Walking beside him, Lucy was conscious of the looks they received. Fletcher stood out anywhere, but next to her small frame, the contrast was even more pronounced. She noticed several women casting appreciative glances his way, and felt an unexpected surge of something that might have been possessiveness. At Mrs. Palmer's, the proprietor was at first intimidated by Fletcher's size and rough appearance, but she warmed up when Lucy explained they needed her expertise. Fletcher showed them the fabric he had purchased, a lovely blue calico, and Lucy assured him it was a fine choice. "But perhaps you might add something else," Mrs. Palmer suggested, sensing a sale. "A nice lace collar or some ribbon trim. It would make the gift more special." Fletcher looked to Lucy for guidance, and she found herself carefully selecting complimentary items, imagining what she herself might like to receive. Fletcher agreed to all her suggestions, and Mrs. Palmer wrapped everything up in brown paper with obvious satisfaction at the unexpected business. As they walked back to the boarding house, Fletcher carrying his packages, he said, "Thank you for your help, Miss Bennett. I am afraid I am out of my depth when it comes to such things." "You did very well on your own," Lucy said. "The blue calico was a perfect choice. Your sister will love it." "I hope so. Sarah has been patient with me over the years, even though I am not around as much as I should be. She deserves something special. You are traveling to her wedding. Yes, in September. It is in a settlement about 60 miles north of here. I will need to leave by mid-September to arrive in time. Lucy felt her stomach drop. It was currently late July. That meant Fletcher had, at most, 6 weeks before he would leave, and more likely he would return to his mountain cabin much sooner than that. As if reading her thoughts, Fletcher said, I may be in Salt Lake City for a while longer than I initially planned. My business is taking more time than I expected, and he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. And I find I am not as eager to return to solitude as I usually am. Lucy felt hope flutter in her chest, but tried to quell it. She could not afford to read too much into his words. Well, you are welcome to stay at the boarding house as long as you need. They walked in silence for a moment, then Fletcher said, Miss Bennett, I hope this is not too forward, but would you be willing to call me Fletcher? Mr. Daniels feels too formal for. He trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. Only if you will call me Lucy. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. I would be honored, Lucy. The sound of her name in his deep voice sent a shiver down her spine despite the summer heat. That evening, as had become their habit, they sat on the back porch and looked up at the overcast sky. The clouds seemed even thicker than before, and there was a heaviness to the air that suggested a storm might finally be building. I wonder if it will ever clear, Lucy mused. I cannot remember the last time I saw stars. It will clear, Fletcher said with certainty. Weather always changes eventually. You just have to be patient. Are you a patient man, Fletcher? He considered the question seriously. When it matters, yes. I have learned that some things are worth waiting for, even if the waiting is difficult. Lucy felt his eyes on her and turned to meet his gaze. In the dim light from the kitchen window, his features were shadowed, making him look even more rugged and wild. But his eyes were gentle, and Lucy saw something in them that made her breath catch. Lucy, he said softly, I need to tell you something. Her heart began to pound. What is it? But before he could answer, one of the mining prospectors burst out onto the porch, agitated and talking rapidly about a dispute with the other prospector over their claim. The moment was broken, and Fletcher stood to help calm the situation, his natural authority taking over. By the time everything was settled and peace restored, it was late, and Lucy needed to finish preparing for the next morning. Fletcher caught her hand briefly as she headed inside. Tomorrow, he said. We will talk tomorrow. Lucy nodded, feeling the warmth of his large hand engulfing hers, and went to bed with her mind racing. But tomorrow brought complications. Mrs. Hartley woke with a bad cold and needed Lucy's constant attention. Then one of the guest rooms discovered a leak in the roof during a brief, unexpected rain shower, requiring Lucy to move the guest to another room and deal with the damage. Then the butcher delivered the wrong cut of meat for supper, necessitating a trip to town to sort it out. Lucy barely saw Fletcher all day, and when she finally had a free moment in the evening, she found him gone. A note left with Mrs. Hartley that he had business to attend to and would return late. This pattern continued for 3 more frustrating days. Every time Lucy thought she might have a chance to speak privately with Fletcher, something intervened. She was beginning to wonder if fate was conspiring against them. On the 4th morning, Lucy woke before dawn as usual, but instead of going straight to the kitchen, she stepped out onto the back porch for a moment of peace before the day's chaos began. And there, standing in the pre-dawn darkness, was Fletcher. You are up early, she said softly, not wanting to wake anyone. Could not sleep. He looked haggard, as if he too had been wrestling with frustration. Lucy, I have been trying to talk to you for days. I know, I am sorry everything has been so hectic. It is not your fault. He ran a hand through his long hair, a gesture of agitation she had not seen from him before. "I am not good at this. I spend too much time in the mountains, not enough time around people. I do not know the right words." "The right words for what?" Lucy asked, though her heart was already racing because she thought she might know. Fletcher turned to face her fully, his large frame blocking out everything else. "Lucy, I came to Salt Lake City for supplies and to buy a gift for my sister, yes. But I also came because I had been feeling like something was missing from my life. I told myself I was content in my solitude, that I did not need anything more than what I had. But the truth is, I was lonely. Not alone, but lonely, and I did not even realize it until I met you." Lucy could not breathe, could not think of anything except the earnest intensity in his eyes. "These past days, getting to know you, have been the happiest I can remember in years," Fletcher continued. "You are kind and smart and strong, and when you smile it is like sunshine. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I am just a mountain man with nothing to offer but a rough cabin and a hard life. But I have to at least tell you how I feel, even if you do not feel the same way." "Fletcher," Lucy whispered, finding her voice at last, "I do feel the same way. I have never felt this way about anyone before. When you are near, everything seems brighter, safer. When you are not, I find myself watching for you. I barely know you, but somehow it feels like I have known you forever." The smile that spread across Fletcher's face was radiant. He reached out and gently cupped her face with one massive hand, his touch surprisingly tender. "I have been waiting for clear skies," he said. "My father's tradition, but the skies have not cleared and I find I cannot wait any longer. Lucy Bennett, I need to ask you something, but I will not ask unless you give me permission. May I ask you my question?" Lucy understood what he was asking, understood the courtesy and respect inherent in his request for permission. Her eyes filled with tears, moved by his thoughtfulness. "Yes," she said, "you may ask." Fletcher took a breath, and Lucy could see that despite his size and strength, he was nervous. "Lucy, I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other for a short time. But I believe some things are meant to be, and I believe I was meant to walk through the door of this boarding house and meet you. Would you consider being my wife? Would you come with me to the mountains and build a life together? I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy, trying to be worthy of you." Lucy felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Fletcher, I will marry you." With a sound that was half laugh, half sob, Fletcher pulled her into his arms, lifting her clear off the ground. She wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling the solid strength of him, the realness of this moment. When he set her back down, he kept his arms around her, and they stood there in the darkness, holding each other. "I want to do this properly," Fletcher said after a moment. "I want to court you, give you time to be sure. I know I am asking you to give up everything here, and that is not a small thing." "I do not need time to be sure," Lucy said firmly. "I am sure now." "Then I want to court you anyway. You deserve that. You deserve romance and proper courting." He pulled back to look down at her, his eyes serious. "And I still want to kiss you under the stars. I want that first kiss to be special, to be under the open sky with the stars as witnesses. Will you wait with me for clear skies?" Lucy's heart melted completely. "I will wait," she said. "But Fletcher, you should know I have never been kissed, not by anyone. So whenever it happens, however it happens, it will be special because it will be you." Fletcher's expression softened with tenderness. "Then I will make certain it is perfect. I promise you that." Over the following weeks, Fletcher courted Lucy with a quiet, determined romance that left her breathless. He extended his stay at the boarding house indefinitely, taking on odd jobs around Salt Lake City to pay for his room and have money to spend on courting. He brought Lucy wildflowers he picked on the outskirts of town, always presenting them to her with an endearing formality. He helped with the heavy work around the boarding house, chopping wood and making repairs, his massive strength making quick work of tasks that would have taken Lucy hours. They walked together in the evenings, exploring the town and talking about everything and nothing. Fletcher told her about his childhood, growing up in Pennsylvania, before heading west after his parents died. He told her about learning to trap and hunt, about building his cabin with his own hands, about the harsh winters and beautiful summers in the high country. Lucy told him about her dreams, about the life she had imagined for herself before her parents died. She admitted that she had felt adrift these past 3 years, going through the motions of living without really feeling alive. Fletcher listened to everything with his full attention, as if nothing else in the world mattered but her words, Mrs. Hartley was initially skeptical of the match, worried that Fletcher might be taking advantage of Lucy's innocence. But as she watched them together over the days and weeks, she softened. "That is a good man," she told Lucy one afternoon. "Different from town men, but good. He looks at you like you are the most precious thing in the world." "He makes me feel that way," Lucy admitted. "Are you truly ready to leave and go live in the wilderness?" Mrs. Hartley asked. "It will be a hard life, Lucy. No neighbors for miles, no shops or society. Just you and him and whatever you can make together." "I am ready," Lucy said without hesitation. "I would rather have a hard life with Fletcher than an easy life without him." Mrs. Hartley patted her hand. "Then you have my blessing, and you will always have a home here if you need it." Fletcher proposed formally to Mrs. Hartley, asking for her blessing as Lucy's employer and guardian figure. He spoke eloquently about his intentions, his ability to provide for Lucy, and his determination to make her happy. Mrs. Hartley gave her blessing, though she insisted they marry in Salt Lake City before heading to the mountains so that everything would be proper and legal. But still, the skies did not clear. Day after day, night after night, the clouds remained thick and impenetrable. Fletcher and Lucy fell into a pattern of standing on the back porch each evening, looking up at those frustrating clouds, waiting for the stars to appear. "I am beginning to think the weather is mocking us," Lucy said one night in mid-August, after nearly a month of cloudy skies. "It will clear," Fletcher said, as he always did, but there was a note of frustration in his voice now. "I want to do this right. I want to honor my father's tradition, honor you the way you deserve. Fletcher, I do not need stars, I just need you." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on top of her head. "I know, but I need it. I need to make that promise under the stars, to feel my father's blessing and know that what I am doing is right. Does that make sense?" "Yes," Lucy said, leaning back against his solid strength. "Yes, it makes perfect sense." They set a tentative wedding date for early September, which would give them time for a brief wedding trip before Fletcher needed to head north for his sister's wedding. Lucy would come with him to meet Sarah, and then they would return to Salt Lake City to gather Lucy's few belongings before heading to the mountains and the cabin that would be her new home. As the days passed, Lucy gave her notice to Mrs. Hartley, who had already hired a young woman to replace her. Lucy spent her free time preparing for her new life, sewing sturdy clothes suitable for mountain living and learning everything she could from Fletcher about what to expect. He was patient with her questions, clearly pleased that she was taking such an active interest in the life they would build together. But still, every night, they stood on that porch and looked at those clouds. And every night, Fletcher held her but did not kiss her, waiting for his moment under the stars. 2 days before their scheduled wedding, Lucy woke in the middle of the night to an unusual sound. It took her a moment to identify it as silence. The constant wind that had been blowing for weeks had stopped. She rose and went to her window, looking out, and gasped. The clouds were breaking up. After more than 6 weeks of overcast skies, the clouds were finally parting. And through the gaps, Lucy could see stars, brilliant and bright. She pulled on her robe and hurried downstairs as quietly as she could, her heart pounding with excitement. She slipped out the back door onto the porch and stood there, staring up at the emerging stars, watching as more and more of them appeared as the clouds continued to dissipate. She did not hear Fletcher approach, but suddenly he was there, standing behind her on the porch. He wore only his trousers and an unbuttoned shirt, as if he too had risen in haste. His long hair was loose around his shoulders, and in the starlight he looked almost wild, like some spirit of the mountains made flesh. "You saw," Lucy said, not taking her eyes from the sky. "I saw." His voice was rough with emotion. "Lucy, the stars are out." She turned to face him, and the look in his eyes made her knees weak. There was such love there, such fierce devotion, that it took her breath away. "Lucy Bennett," Fletcher said, his voice formal despite his state of undress. "May I have your permission to ask you something?" It was the same question he had asked all those weeks ago, but this time the weight of it was different. Lucy understood what he was asking, understood that this was the moment they had been waiting for. "Yes," she whispered. "You may ask." Fletcher took both her hands in his, and in the starlight, with the vast Utah sky stretched out above them, he spoke. "Lucy, I love you. I loved you from almost the moment I met you, though I did not have a name for it at first. You have brought joy and light into my life. You have made me want things I never dared to hope for. Will you be my wife, my partner, my companion through whatever life brings us? Will you let me love you for the rest of my days?" "Yes," Lucy said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will. I love you, Fletcher. I love you so much." Fletcher cupped her face gently in his massive hands, tilting it up toward his. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Here now under these stars, please," Lucy breathed. He lowered his head slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, but Lucy rose on her tiptoes to meet him. When their lips finally touched, it was soft and sweet and perfect, exactly as she had imagined, and yet so much more. Fletcher kissed her with a tenderness that belied his size, treating her like something precious and fragile. Lucy felt as if her whole body was made of light, as if she might float away if not anchored by his hands on her face. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "That was worth waiting for," he said. "It was perfect." Lucy opened her eyes to find him watching her with such naked love that it made her heart ache. "I am so glad I waited for you." They stood there for a long time, holding each other and watching the stars emerge fully as the last clouds blew away. The sky was magnificent, a vast expanse of glittering light stretching from horizon to horizon. Lucy had never seen it so clear, so beautiful, and she knew she would remember this night for the rest of her life. "In the mountains," Fletcher said quietly, "the stars are even brighter. There are no city lights, nothing to dim them. On clear nights you can see the Milky Way like a river of light across the sky. I cannot wait to show you. I cannot wait to see it." Lucy leaned into his embrace. "I cannot wait for all of it, Fletcher, every part of our life together." He kissed the top of her head. "I will do everything in my power to make you happy, Lucy. I swear it. You already make me happy. Just being with you makes me happy." They eventually went back inside, Fletcher walking Lucy to the stairs that led to her room. He kissed her once more, gently, reverently, and then bid her good night. Lucy floated back to her room, her heart so full she thought it might burst. 2 days later, Lucy Bennett became Lucy Daniels in a simple ceremony at the small church in Salt Lake City. Mrs. Hartley stood as her witness, and Fletcher had asked the retired Army officer from the boarding house to stand for him. Lucy wore a dress she had sewn herself, pale blue cotton with white lace at the collar, and Fletcher had gotten his first real haircut and beard trim in years, though he was still unmistakably a mountain man in his buckskin jacket and new trousers. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Fletcher kissed Lucy with a joy that made the small gathering of witnesses smile. Lucy felt as if she might burst from happiness as they walked back to the boarding house for the simple reception Mrs. Hartley had insisted on organizing. The other boarders had contributed dishes, and there was a modest but cheerful feast laid out in the dining room. They ate and talked, and Fletcher told stories that made everyone laugh, his usual quiet reserve loosened by happiness and excitement. Lucy watched him from across the table, marveling that this strong, kind, wonderful man was now her husband. That night, Fletcher had arranged for them to stay in the best room at a small hotel in town, wanting to give Lucy one night of luxury before they began their journey. He carried her over the threshold with ease, making her laugh and set her down gently in the middle of the room. "I know this is not much," he said, suddenly seeming nervous. "You deserve better, deserve more. When we get to the cabin, it will be even more rustic than this." "Are you sure you are ready for that?" Lucy went to him and took his face in her hands, making him look at her. "Fletcher Daniels, you listen to me. I do not care about luxury or comfort or any of it. I care about you. I care about being with you. You could take me to a cave in the mountains and I would be happy as long as you were there with me. Do you understand?" His smile was brilliant, all nervousness vanishing. "I understand, and I promise you it is not a cave. It is a very nice cabin," Lucy laughed. "I am sure it is." He kissed her then, and this time there was a heat to it that had not been there before, a promise of things to come. Lucy felt a flutter of nerves mixed with anticipation, but mostly she felt love, overwhelming and all-encompassing. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, Fletcher treating Lucy with infinite patience and care. He was gentle with her, conscious of his size and strength, murmuring words of love and reassurance as he showed her the physical side of marriage. Lucy gave herself to him completely, trusting him in this as she trusted him in everything else. And when they finally lay together afterward, Lucy curled against Fletcher's chest with his arms around her. She felt a completeness she had never known before. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Fletcher rumbled back. "My wife." Lucy smiled at the way he said it with such wonder and pride. "My husband." They left Salt Lake City 3 days later, heading north to Fletcher's sister's wedding. Lucy rode a gentle mare that Fletcher had purchased for her, with a pack horse carrying their supplies and Lucy's few belongings. Fletcher rode his own large horse, a powerful bay gelding that seemed bred for carrying his substantial frame. The journey took 4 days, and Lucy loved every moment of it. They camped under the stars each night, Fletcher teaching her how to set up camp and manage in the wilderness. He was a patient teacher, showing her how to build a fire, how to cook over open flames, how to read the weather and the land. Lucy absorbed everything eagerly, determined to be a true partner to him in their mountain life. On the 3rd night, as they lay in their bedrolls looking up at the stars, Fletcher said, "I am glad I waited. To kiss you, I mean. I am glad we did it properly under the stars." "I am too," Lucy said. "It made it even more special. Though I confess, these past weeks of waiting were difficult," Fletcher chuckled. "They were, but my father was right. Making a promise under the stars, making it with intention and patience, it means something. It made our wedding feel sacred in a way I cannot quite explain. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was. I wish you could have met him. He would have loved you." Fletcher reached over and took her hand. Thank you for being willing to wait with me. I know it seemed foolish." It was not foolish. It was romantic and meaningful and entirely you, which makes it perfect. They arrived at the small settlement where Sarah lived on the afternoon of the fourth day. Sarah came running out of her small cabin when she spotted them, and Lucy was struck by how young and pretty she was, perhaps 20 years old, with the same dark hair and gray-blue eyes as her brother. "Fletcher." Sarah threw herself at her brother, who caught her easily and swung her around. "You came. I was so worried you might not make it. I promised I would be here," Fletcher said, setting her down, "and I have brought someone special to meet you." He turned to Lucy, who had dismounted and was standing somewhat nervously nearby. "Sarah, this is my wife, Lucy. We were married just a few days ago." Sarah's eyes went wide. "Your wife? Fletcher, you wrote nothing about this. I had no idea you were even courting anyone." "It happened quickly," Fletcher admitted. "But it was right. Sarah, I am happier than I have been in years. Lucy has changed everything." Sarah looked at Lucy with keen assessment, and Lucy straightened under her gaze, determined to make a good impression. After a moment, Sarah's face broke into a warm smile. "Any woman who can make my brother look this happy is welcome in my family. Lucy, I am so pleased to meet you." She pulled Lucy into a hug, and Lucy felt some of her nervousness ease. Sarah was warm and genuine, and over the next few days, as they prepared for her wedding, Lucy came to like her very much. Sarah told stories about growing up with Fletcher, about the protective big brother who had looked after her through hardship and loss. Lucy could see the deep love between the siblings, and it made her love Fletcher even more. Sarah's wedding was simple but joyful, and her groom was a kind young farmer who clearly adored her. At the reception, Fletcher danced with both his sister and his wife, and Lucy watched the happiness on his face with satisfaction. This man who had seemed so solitary and alone had family and now a wife. He was building a life, building connections, and she was privileged to be part of it. As they prepared to leave the next morning, Sarah pulled Lucy aside. "Take care of him," she said quietly. "Fletcher acts tough, but he feels things deeply. He has been alone too long, and I worried about him. But I can see he loves you and that you love him. That is all I wanted for him." "I will take care of him," Lucy promised, "and you must come visit us in the mountains. Fletcher told me the cabin is not that far from here." "I will. In the spring, perhaps, when the weather is good." Sarah hugged her. "Welcome to the family, Lucy." The journey from Sarah's settlement to Fletcher's cabin took another 3 days, but these were different from the journey north. Now they were heading into real wilderness, climbing higher into the Wasatch Mountains, following trails that were little more than game paths. The air grew cooler and thinner, and the pine forests grew denser. On the afternoon of the third day, Fletcher turned to Lucy with a grin. "We are almost there. Just over this next ridge." Lucy felt a flutter of nerves and excitement. This would be her home now, the place where she would spend the rest of her life. When they crested the ridge and started down into a small valley, she caught her first glimpse of the cabin. It was larger than she had expected, a solid structure of logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. It sat in a clearing beside a crystal-clear stream, surrounded by towering pines. The view from the valley was spectacular, mountains rising on all sides, their peaks still snow-capped even in early September. "Oh, Fletcher," Lucy breathed. "It is beautiful." He looked relieved. "You like it?" "I love it. It is perfect." Fletcher dismounted and helped Lucy down, then led her to the cabin. Inside, it was one large room with a sleeping loft above. There was a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area with a cast iron stove, a sturdy table and chairs, and shelves along the walls. Everything was well made and carefully maintained, speaking to Fletcher's skill and care. "I know it is not much," Fletcher began, but Lucy stopped him with a kiss. "It is wonderful," she said firmly. "It is ours, and that makes it perfect." Over the next weeks, Lucy settled into her new life with surprising ease. Fletcher taught her everything she needed to know about living in the mountains: how to smoke meat and preserve food for winter, how to recognize edible plants and medicinal herbs, how to read animal tracks and weather signs. He showed her the best fishing spots and took her hunting, teaching her to shoot and track. Lucy discovered that she loved this life. She loved the solitude and peace, the breathtaking beauty that surrounded them. She loved the work of maintaining their home and preparing for winter. Most of all, she loved building a life with Fletcher, learning his rhythms and habits, discovering new depths to the man she had married. Fletcher, in turn, seemed to blossom with companionship. He talked more, smiled more, laughed more. He would come up behind Lucy as she worked and wrap his arms around her, kissing the top of her head. At night, they would lie in their bed in the loft, listening to the sounds of the forest and talking about everything and nothing. The physical side of their marriage deepened into something beautiful and profound, a connection that went beyond words. One evening in late October, as the first snow of the season began to fall, they sat on the porch wrapped in warm furs, watching the flakes drift down. The sky was clear above the clouds, stars visible in brilliant profusion. "Remember when we were waiting for the skies to clear," Fletcher said. "When I was waiting to kiss you under the stars, of course. It felt like it would never happen. I am glad it happened when it did. I am glad we waited." He pulled her closer. "Lucy, I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, hearing something serious in his tone. "What is it?" "I have been thinking about my father's tradition, about asking important questions under the stars. And I realize there is another question I need to ask you, though in some ways you have already answered it just by being here with me." Lucy waited, her heart beating faster. "Lucy, will you build a family with me? Will you give me children and raise them here in these mountains, teach them to love this land as we do? Will you stay with me, not just for now but forever?" Lucy felt tears sting her eyes. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it. I want children with you, Fletcher. I want to build a family and a life that will last generations. I want forever with you." Fletcher kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Lucy felt the promise of that kiss echo through her entire being. This was what she had been waiting for all her life without knowing it. This man, this place, this love. The years that followed were full and rich. Lucy gave birth to their first child, a son they named Thomas after Fletcher's father, in the spring of their second year together. Fletcher was beside himself with joy and pride, holding his son with infinite tenderness, despite his massive hands. Thomas was followed 2 years later by a daughter named Rose, and then 3 years after that, by another son named Jack. The cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family, Fletcher adding on rooms with the same skill he had shown in building the original structure. They made trips to Salt Lake City once or twice a year for supplies and to visit Mrs. Hartley, who doted on the children. Sarah visited often, eventually bringing her own children to play with their cousins. Lucy taught the children to read and write, using the few precious books they owned and making up lessons from the world around them. Fletcher taught them woodcraft and survival skills, instilling in them respect for the land and the animals they shared it with. Together, Lucy and Fletcher raised children who were confident and capable, comfortable in the wilderness, and connected to the natural world. On clear nights, the entire family would sometimes go outside and lie on their backs in the meadow near the cabin, looking up at the stars. Fletcher would tell stories about the constellations, making up elaborate tales that had the children giggling. Lucy would watch him with her children gathered around, this fierce mountain man who had become such a gentle, loving father, and feel overwhelming gratitude for the life they had built. Thomas grew into a tall, strong young man who eventually chose to become a trapper like his father, building his own cabin a day's ride away, but still close enough to visit regularly. Rose became a skilled herbalist and healer, her gentle nature and keen mind serving her well as she helped people throughout the scattered mountain communities. Jack, the youngest, had a gift with animals and became known throughout the region for his ability to train horses. As the years passed, Lucy and Fletcher grew older but not apart. If anything, their love deepened, matured into something even more beautiful than those early days of passionate courtship. They knew each other completely, anticipated each other's needs and thoughts, worked together with the ease of long practice. When their hair turned gray and their movements slowed, they would still sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains, holding hands as they had since the beginning. They became grandparents and then great-grandparents, their cabin a gathering place for a growing family that spread throughout the mountains. On Lucy's 70th birthday, Fletcher took her hand and led her out to the meadow on a clear autumn night. The stars were brilliant overhead, just as they had been that night in Salt Lake City when he had first kissed her. "You remember," Fletcher asked, "when I asked your permission to ask you to marry me?" "Of course," Lucy said. "How could I forget? You made me wait weeks for clear skies." Fletcher chuckled, the sound still deep and warm despite his age. "Best decision I ever made, that and asking you to marry me in the first place." "Second best," Lucy corrected. "The best decision was walking through the door of Mrs. Hartley's boarding house. You are right about that." Fletcher pulled her close and they stood together under the stars, two people who had built a life and a legacy together. "I would do it all again, Lucy. Every moment, every hardship, every joy, I would choose you every single time." "And I would choose you," Lucy said, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Always you, my mountain man." They kissed under those stars just as they had so many decades before, and Lucy felt the same flutter in her heart, the same overwhelming love. Some things, she thought, never changed. Some loves were eternal. Fletcher Daniels passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Lucy holding his hand and their children and grandchildren gathered around. Lucy followed him just 18 months later, and they were buried side by side in the meadow where they had spent so many evenings watching the stars. Their descendants continued to live in the mountains, telling stories about the mountain man who had waited for clear skies to ask permission to kiss the woman he loved. The cabin was maintained as a family home, passed down through generations, a testament to the love that had built it and the family that had grown from that love. And on clear nights, when the stars were particularly bright, family members would gather in that meadow and look up at the sky, remembering Fletcher and Lucy, remembering a love story that had started with patience and respect and grown into something legendary. They would tell their children about the importance of doing things properly, of honoring traditions, of waiting for the right moment even when it was difficult. But most of all, they would tell them about love. Real, deep, lasting love that could weather any storm, survive any hardship, and build something beautiful that would endure long after the lovers themselves had passed. They would tell them about a woman who had never been kissed under the stars, until she met a mountain man who waited for clear skies and asked permission. And in telling these stories, they kept Fletcher and Lucy alive, kept their love alive, ensured that the legacy they had built together would continue for generations to come. The stars that had witnessed their first kiss, that had blessed their marriage and watched over their family, continued to shine bright over the mountains, eternal and unchanging, a fitting symbol for a love that had been just as constant and enduring. The youngest great-great-grandchild, a girl of 8 named Lucy after her ancestor, once asked her grandmother what the secret was to a love like Fletcher and Lucy had shared. Her grandmother smiled and pointed up at the stars. "Patience," she said. "Respect. Asking permission and waiting for the right moment. But mostly, it is about finding someone who makes your heart feel like it is full of starlight, and then choosing them every single day for the rest of your life." That is what your great-great-grandparents did. They chose each other every day, through good times and bad, and they built something that will last forever. Young Lucy looked up at the stars, so bright and beautiful above the mountains, and made a silent promise to herself that when she grew up, she would wait for someone who made her heart feel full of starlight. She would wait for someone who respected her enough to ask permission, someone patient enough to wait for the perfect moment. She would wait for a love like the one in the stories. And somewhere, if spirits could watch over the living, Fletcher and Lucy smiled down at their descendant and knew that their legacy was secure. They had built more than a cabin, more than a family. They had built a legacy of love that would echo through the generations, teaching each new one what it meant to truly love and be loved in return. The mountains stood eternal. The stars continued their ancient dance across the sky, and the story of the mountain man who waited for clear skies and the woman who had never been kissed under the stars lived on, a testament to the power of patience, respect, and a love that was worth waiting for.